Anything, ask Alan anything. Is it cold outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and bringing back one guest and introducing a new guest to the podcast, Marybeth Conley and Rick Woodall. They are a married couple, and they're on a mission, and we want to talk about their mission and their new endeavors. Marybeth, as many of you know, was television talent. World famous in Memphis as a news broadcaster. And Marybeth, you and Rick got married, and now you're in a new endeavor. But first, tell us the story about your relationship, because it's one for the books.
It is indeed. In fact, that's why I kept Conley after we got married, because that's my maiden name. And I said, so do you want me to change my name? How do you feel about that? Because I really didn't care. And he said, I've always thought of you as Marybeth Conley. And that's because we met at 13 in 1972.
Eighth grade.
As eighth graders. And he was my first crush. I fell head over heels in love, but I was very shy. And so
she didn't know how to show that she was in love. Okay. She didn't talk to me.
He did try to flirt. I mean, in retrospect, I can look back and go, yeah, he did. But I would just freeze up. I was so scared of saying something stupid, or because
she's not afraid anymore to do that.
I frequently say something stupid, as you so well know, having been on my show so many times over the years. I excel in that. But he was very outgoing, and he was a Navy brat, so he had moved a lot. And so he just we lived in a very tiny mining town in East Tennessee, and all the girls were crazy about this new boy, and they were much more advanced than I was. So they rushed him. And when I did not flirt back with him, he moved on like any 13-year-old boy would do. But in 2018, my daughter found him on Facebook. And really, the whole story behind what we're doing is just an amazing story, Alan, of God reaching down directly into our lives. And I don't say that lightly, because I truly believe that Rick and I were always meant to be, just because of what happened. And I know that sounds, I don't know, if from a romantic standpoint, it just sounds weird, right? But
sounds okay to me.
Yeah, it's worked out pretty good.
It's worked out. It has, and we also feel like I say we've talked about this.
Oh yeah,
it was supposed to happen as it was supposed to happen for bigger reasons than us. But basically, the story, but what we're doing is called Flip My Life. It's a nonprofit. And we are renovating abandoned houses in Memphis. And it's, even though we live in East Tennessee where we met, and he's lived since 1972, and where I grew up, we are basing this in Memphis because you and I have talked many times over the years. Memphis is just a very special town. The headlines do not reflect Memphis's heart in many cases. And I've always believed Memphis has so much more promise than problems. And I just love the town. The people there allowed me, this little East Tennessee, very young, stupid, naive, not very good talent at that time. It was, I hadn't been in news for more than a year when I came there. And they allowed me in their homes every day for 37 years. And, it was just very special to me. So we're basing it in Memphis, but we're going to renovate abandoned homes for people returning from prison. And we're making it a web show. the overall goal, Alan, is not just about the tangible work, but it's because we feel like the web show will introduce viewers to people, to good people who've done bad things, and hopefully
get that in there.
That's my tagline.
That's her tagline.
Rick's always like, God, how many times have you said that? But it's true, because sometimes those of us who've never had any involvement with incarceration think of felons or lawbreakers as them, when in reality, they are us. And we are all capable of doing wrong. And I don't believe any of us should be judged by our worst day.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we're all redeemed. And what we want to do is introduce viewers to the idea that our whole community benefits if we change from such a retributive criminal justice system to a more restorative criminal justice system. And so that's what we want to introduce people to. We want to introduce people to folks who have done wrong, made bad decisions, but want redemption, want to get back on track.
They want to prove themselves.
That's right.
They want to show that, hey, you know, we did make a mistake, but we want to get out here and prove everyone wrong that we are, you know, worthy to be back in society.
That's right. We figure that creates taxpayers, right? It creates homeowners. It helps the children in these families. It will help the entire society. And the way our criminal justice system operates now sometimes continues the retribution far beyond the person having paid his or her debt to society. Why in the world do we not allow people to vote after they've paid their debt?
Yeah.
That doesn't have anything to do with the crime. Obviously, there are always going to be people who don't want redemption and who are lost, and they need to be kept away from society. But the vast majority, we believe, are people who have screwed up. And there are many factors that we maybe don't know anything about that contribute to a bad decision. It doesn't excuse it.
Right.
But for the grace of God go I, that I was born in a family. We didn't have money, but I had two parents, strong discipline, a lot of love, good education. I didn't earn that. And so how am I to judge someone who grew up in a situation where there didn't look like there were any alternatives except crime? How can I say, well, I'm a good person and that's a bad person, right? So that's why we're doing it as a show. And the idea is that people will watch a flip show for the flip. And maybe in meeting these people, they'll begin to believe all that we just explained. But I know you are a man of faith. And the way Flip My Life came to be is really the part of the story that I love the most. And it's why we're together. So basically, my family started to fall apart in 2003. And, I went through about 15 years of a very rough time. And in 2009, after 6 years of this, I turned to God for the first time in my life. I had been to parochial school my whole life, raised in a very religious family, but I had fallen away, and I never formed a relationship, but I was really, being in a public job, I had to pretend. I had to be on all the time. And at that time, I had 2 daily shows. So I was constantly working on the next show. I never had time to, I was just stretched emotionally thin, and I blamed my job. I thought if I could get out of television, I wouldn't have to pretend all the time. And I could deal with the situation that was going on in my family. So I asked God to show me something that I could do that, to help me escape. A woman I met randomly was telling me about her decision 20 years earlier to leave her corporate job and take her 3 children into the mission field. And I did not understand that decision. And I thought she was nuts. But I just met her, so I wanted to be polite. So I said, so what in the world made you do that? And she said, she turned around, and Alan, she had the most incredible look of peace on her face. And she said, well, because God told me to. And the only place you have peace is when you're where God wants you to be. So I said, how do you get there? And she said, wake up an hour early every day, get into the Word, and ask Him what you're supposed to be doing. So I thought, okay, I can follow a blueprint. So the next morning I got up and I asked God, help, show me what I'm supposed to be doing. I need you. I didn't even believe really that He was real, I don't think. I opened up the Bible on page 1. That's a mistake, which no one explained. So 3 weeks later, I was trapped in Numbers, and I don't know. I guess I expected, yeah. I was really tired because I was getting an hour less sleep a day, and I was mad. I was like, this is supposed to be working. I think I expected to see, Exodus chapter 2, verse 4. Yes, Marybeth, here's what you're supposed to do. It wasn't working that way. So my dad was dying in Knoxville, and I was on a plane going to Knoxville to be by his bedside. I did not want to talk to anyone because for an hour I had no family with me. I had no viewers with me. I was allowed to just be, and I had my novel in my hand. And the guy in the middle seat started talking to me, and I was thinking, don't talk to him. Shut up. But he was doing the whole, what do you do? And he said, I'm a pastor. I was called out of my congregation a few years ago, and the Lord told me to help other congregations get into the Word. And the way I was raised, we didn't really getting into the Word was not a term I had ever really used, but I recognized it from what the woman had told me to do. So I said to him, I'm trying to do that, and it's not working. So we spent the whole hour of the flight discussing how to build this relationship with God. And when he found out I started the Bible on page 1, he started laughing. He's like, you're supposed to start in the New Testament and it will inform the Old. And I'm like, that's ridiculous because that's the middle of the book, right? Well, he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get a book by Watchman Nee. He's a Chinese dissident, and the book is called Sit, Walk, Stand. And it will take you into Ephesians, and from there, God will guide you. Great, I have another blueprint, right? So I write Sit, Walk, Stand down inside the cover of my novel. I get to Knoxville, my dad dies, and because his death he was in hospice, so we had already arranged everything. There was a day where my family had not arrived yet, and I had a whole empty day. So I called this woman that I knew she was an acquaintance. We were not close friends. She knew nothing about my challenges in my family. I don't know why I called her, but we went to have lunch and we're sitting in Panera Bread, and she suddenly reaches over to my arm just as we're making small talk, waiting for our food. She grabs my arm and she says, I almost forgot. When we leave here, would you follow me to Cedar Bluff bookstore? Because the other day I was online buying books and God told me to buy you this book, and it came this morning. It would save me sending it to Memphis. It's called Sit, Walk, Stand. Have you ever heard of it? And that was the first time that I started believing that really there is something bigger than us. So fast forward, over 6 years, I became addicted to my time in the morning when I would just sit, I would cry, I would talk to God. I just, it was the only time that I had peace. And it's what got me through the day, where I could be the TV, happy, perky, lively. And so September 2015, I surrendered. And over my whole life, I've heard that term and I've kind of rolled my eyes. I didn't understand it. But all I wanted was to be doing what he wanted me to do, because I needed that peace. And so I said, I will do anything you want me to do. Just show me. Please don't make it be TV. I'd really like to get out of TV. And about 2 weeks later, I found myself writing in my prayer journal the words "flip my life." And I was writing out a TV show idea. And as I was writing it, I was like, I don't want to do this. I told you I don't want to do TV. I don't have any money. I don't have the energy. I've got 2 daily shows. I've got 4 kids. My life's a shambles. I gave them all the excuses in the book for 3 years, about every 6 months. And the original idea of the show that I was writing there was to take abandoned houses and renovate them into homes for people trapped in generational poverty, which ever since I moved to Memphis has been a real touch point for me. But something felt wrong with the idea, and I just used that as an excuse to keep putting it off. And about every 6 months in my prayer time, it would come back, and I'd be like, no, something's not right with that. I don't want to do TV. Until the end of February 2018, and in my prayer time, it came roaring back. It was like a presence in my head. And it said, it's time to get started on Flip My Life. But the houses are not supposed to be for people in generational poverty. The houses need to go to people returning from prison. And my reaction was, that's never been my issue. That's what? But it fit. It suddenly, it's like it worked. And the voice was there every morning for 2 or 3 weeks. It would not go away. And I kept saying, I don't have any money. I have no contacts. Because Adeline, even though I've been in television since 1982, I never intended to be in TV. You and I've talked about that before. I didn't study it. I didn't want it. I've tried to get out of it. But I was naturally good at it. I never understood why, because I'm actually very shy. I have had there's no reason why I should be on TV, but I was good at it. And I just kept, every time I'd try to get out of it, they'd give me some other, incentive to stay. So it's not like, because I never wanted a TV career, I never networked. I haven't kept up with anybody I ever worked with. So I was like, I don't have any contacts. I don't know how to produce a TV show. But the voice would not go away. And so finally, it was the beginning of March of 2018. And I said, fine. I wrote it down in my prayer journal. I said, you know what? I'll get started on Flip My Life. But first, I need to shoot a pilot. And to shoot a pilot, I need a contractor with whom I have chemistry. Because, in television, chemistry is everything. And you can't fake it. It's the one thing you cannot fake. Because viewers know. I said, so I need a contractor with chemistry who would care about the issue of reentry. You figure that out and we'll get started. And the voice went away. I stopped thinking about Flip My Life. I went on just trying to deal with the daily grind. And Memorial Day of that year, 2018, 3 months later, my family was in Mascot, Tennessee, which was my hometown. For a family reunion, and I took my daughter for a walk around my old neighborhood. She was 14 at the time, and I was just kind of pointing out this place and that place, and so and so lived there, and we passed this last house on the circle, and I said very casually, I used to walk around at night wishing this boy would come out because I had a crush on him. He lived there.
Yeah, that'd be me.
And isn't he cute? I don't remember even saying his name, but apparently I did, because the next day she and I were driving somewhere and she said, I found him and he's so old.
So old. I think she was expecting a 13, 14-year-old boy in the picture. Here I'm 60.
And I didn't know it. I said, what are you talking about? And she handed me her phone and it was Rick's Facebook page. And I didn't even recognize him. A lot of years had gone by and I was like, hair. Is that really him? He was bald now. Yeah, he had hair at 13. And I was, and you can't always tell. But what got me was that, remember the summer of 2018, we were, the separation policy at the border was in place. And there had just been a few years of kind of a rise in white nationalism and a us against them kind of atmosphere, and it was breaking my heart. And his profile picture and his cover photo featured him holding a tiny little black girl. And I know that East Tennesseans are not all bigots, but there's not a lot of diversity in East Tennessee. And so having grown up here, I knew that there is, in some sections of the country where there's not a lot of diversity, there's an ignorance about systemic racism. So here I was looking at this picture of this guy. He's on a motorcycle, and he's a middle-aged white guy who I knew grew up in an area of the country that was not very diverse. And my prejudices told me that he should be this way, like a white nationalist, and yet he was holding this black girl. And I did not feel any kind of romantic twinges, or there were no birds singing, but I wanted to know why he loved that little girl. I did not friend him, which is weird because we were friends. We hadn't dated, so I wasn't worried that friending him, because I have a lot of male friends, right? And we were friends as kids. Mm-hmm. But I didn't friend him. I just went to his page a few times to try to figure out if maybe he had married an African-American woman and this was her grandchild. Maybe one of his children had a black child. But because we weren't friends, I couldn't see everything. So we got close to the Charlottesville anniversary, the end of July, and I just had to know. So I messaged him thinking, I'll just start a conversation with an old friend and I'll work my way around to. So who is this little black girl?
Using those reporter skills.
That's right.
Yes.
And because we weren't Facebook friends, I thought he might not see the message, because on my Facebook, if you're not friends, it goes to a folder that is not right there. So I thought if he doesn't see it, then I'm just not meant to know. Well, a week later, he messaged me back. It took him a week. And we just started catching up on the past 40 years. And he told me he had always had the biggest crush on me. And I fell apart. I can't explain it. I was sitting on my couch reading those words and thinking, you are a fruitcake. You're 59 years old. You don't know this person. You haven't seen him in 40 years. You don't know anything about his life. You have a family. What is wrong with you? But I felt like a 13-year-old girl who'd just been passed a note in homeroom. So we went back and forth a little bit. I told him I'd had a crush on him too, and we caught up.
Which excited me too.
Anyway, we talked the next morning for 3 hours, and 10 days later we met in Nashville. We sat in the Opryland Hotel garden for 12 hours and talked. And I went to Nashville because I needed to know if this was nostalgia that I was feeling, because it was not me. I was not an emotional person my whole life. I certainly over the previous 10 or 15 years had shut down. And so I didn't understand who I was to be feeling this way. I felt so happy just talking to him. It was foreign to me. So we met in Nashville, and I came home and I told my husband, I inadvertently opened a door that I'm not going to be able to close. And when I told him what happened, he agreed. And we were already so far apart. Anyway, here's the kicker.
All that to say this.
The day after I told my husband, in my prayer time, was when it hit me that in our very first conversation, Rick had told me we'd been catching up on the last 40 years, and Rick had told me he'd been a contractor since the early 90s. And in 2008, it was a day, as he put it, he lost his mind.
Is this where I get to talk?
This is where you get to talk, finally.
I lost my mind. Still don't know why I did it. Can't figure it out. Never been in trouble in my life, but I was at the lowest point of my life, I guess. And I walked into a First Tennessee bank and robbed it with an unloaded BB gun. Had no intentions of hurting anyone. I just, for some reason, that was the only way I knew to get some money to pay bills, to keep moving on. And like I said, that's probably the lowest point in my life. Never been in trouble. Had to, I just still can't figure it out. And so turn around, I go off to jail. Now, I'm afforded some privilege. They let me out. The judge let me out for pretty much 3 months without a bond. Only bank robber that I know of, and a lot of people know, didn't have a bond. They let me out on my own name. to travel East Tennessee and work and finish up a couple of jobs. And it also allowed me to see my daughter graduate from college. And then I reported on May the 4th and went to prison in 2009. And they shipped me off to Ocilla, Georgia for a while. And then when I was finally sentenced in August, they sent me to Texas. And I was of the belief, you go to jail. You deserve to go to jail. You're a bad person. You'll never be anything again. I mean, I was just the whole thing of you do the crime, you do the time, I had feelings of.
He was a hard ass.
There you go. Let's say it. I was a hard ass. But I also knew I was guilty, and I knew I deserved to be in prison. But my sentence was light, and they gave me 42 months, and I did 31. But while I was in Texas, I met so many people that had a story that got them into trouble. And it was like, oh my gosh, you're not this horrible person. Or the sentencing was different for a little bit of marijuana because of the color of skin or
ethnicity.
Yeah, ethnicity. Even people had money maybe didn't get as quite a big sense as someone with no money because they couldn't afford a lawyer or whatever. But I saw so many differences. And I saw people that in prison, it was like, I just want to get out and prove myself. And I couldn't wait to get back out because I'd pretty much shamed my family. And nobody had ever been in trouble with the law. So I wanted to get out to prove myself. So I got to thinking of all the other people, these guys that are in jail, and all they talk about is, well, I can't wait to get out and do this and make something of my life.
But the big difference, as he told me in this conversation, the first conversation, is that he never had to check a box.
Yeah.
He had a business. He had skills. He was able to get back on his feet because he had never been in trouble and had grown up with a supportive family. He could live with his parents while he never had to check a box for an apartment. And he was telling me this in our first conversation, that it made him aware. He said prison helped him evolve from this kind of hard ass, you're a loser mentality if you break the law, to a more understanding of factors that contribute to that. And also the difficulties, the hurdles that we place in front of people after they've paid their debt, right? And he was telling me all this. It went right over my head until after we met and we decided this is it. And I told Bob, my former husband. Bob agreed. It was the most amicable divorce ever. We knew it was the right thing to do. And in fact, all our children know it was the right thing to do. They've all told me that. But it was after all that in my prayer time, it was like God said, so 6 months ago, you told me you'd get started on Flip My Life if I figured out how to get you a contractor with whom you have chemistry who would care about the issue of reentry. What are you going to do now? And that's why we're doing Flip My Life, because it's like I ordered him up. So, it's difficult. We would really love to have someone come along and be the executive producer, find the funding, the crews. We're doing all that. And we don't know how to do it, but we're doing it. And we've had so many doors open that shouldn't have opened. So our first project is in Fraser. It's a house that was donated to Lifeline to Success, which is a reentry group that helps train ex-offenders. I'm sure you're familiar with Lifeline.
Yep.
They own it. They didn't have the money to renovate it. So we're renovating it for them. We're funding it through County Commission, gave us some grants. TVA is a huge sponsor.
They're helping out.
They're doing all the energy related work, which is huge. We have a landscaper who's going to remove some trees for us on the cheap.
We've got a contractor, Antonio Abrams, and
doing it free.
Him, yes, and fantastic. He's got a mission himself, so he's helping us because I'm up here in Knoxville sometimes, and he knows, all the permitting and everything down there. He's going to run for us, but
his codes are different.
He can find crews, but we're also using crews from Lifeline to Success. These guys are out of prison and they're wanting. We've we've had some fun with these guys. They're really wanting to learn. They really love destroying this house.
Yeah, we're visual demolition.
One guy just had so much fun tearing it apart. He said, "I love this," you know.
So we're going to be teaching them some skills as we renovate it, and we hope that the show will catch the eye of folks. You know, we don't know. We truly don't know what God has in mind. But all I know is that I went from someone who had a very intellectual belief in God and no personal relationship to someone who knows that there is something more than us. You can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can say he or she or I don't. It's not about any one denomination. For me, it is totally about, I know that God is in charge of this project, and I figure it'll all work out. And so that's what we're doing.
It's kind of funny. It seems like everyone we run into on this project, some guy coming out to look at cutting the trees down for us. Come to find out, he came out as a felon in '91 and got on with the sanitation department
in Memphis, a part-time truck.
Only job he could get.
In the back of a truck.
And he worked his way up all the way to supervisor, operations manager.
He just retired and joined this tree company. That was the guy, the tree company, who had offered to look at the trees we needed removed. They happened to send him out. And when we told him, here's why we're renovating this house, he told us his story. It's just
everybody's got a story, and it's just so great. It's how they've overcome, or want just to prove themselves.
So,
and that's what we want the show to show, is the flip the house, yes, to get their views, but also to show that these people coming out of prison just want to prove themselves and become productive,
and that people deserve a second chance.
Right.
I'm thankful because so many people gave me a second chance. I didn't have to, like I said, check a box. I had people waiting on me for 3 years to do work for them. I'm very thankful. So this is something that's hit both of us in so many different ways.
So,
well, it's a truly wonderful story, and people say, I don't know how to how God speaks to me, and so often God speaks to you through other people. And you've got to listen to that and be open to it. And you certainly, Marybeth, both of you, Rick, you both were open to it. And that's the major difference. And when we open our eyes to that, it's all around us. But our lives are so oriented away from listening to that. So we're out of time, but I love your story. I love both of you.
Thank you.
Marybeth, you and I go way back, and and you can look at your life and see how your life has been a preparation for this.
Absolutely.
And even if you never get it on television, you've already touched so many lives. But I have a feeling you're going to get it on television.